You've heard the old adage, it's not the destination, but the journey that's important in life. Those words certainly apply to Chicago's elevated train, known to everyone simply as the L, a rumbling ride along tracks more than 100 years old in places, twisting and turning, passing inches away from apartment dwellers and shopkeepers through a mind-boggling melange of neighborhoods, cultures, and people, through what some say is the real Chicago, far from the soaring skyscrapers downtown. The CTA has given us our own private train, so we can take you all over town to visit some of Chicago's many diverse neighborhoods. It's like traveling the world without ever leaving the city. Hi, I'm Geoffrey Baer. I'm a volunteer tour guide for the Chicago Architecture Foundation and a producer for WTTW Channel 11. We'll start our tour here in the downtown loop. This is the Quincy L station, built all the way back in 1897. It's been completely restored to its original appearance, right down to the advertising posters. All aboard! As we circle downtown on the Loop Elevated, we get a unique perspective on Chicago's famous architecture. Many buildings have been remodeled at the ground level, but up here we can see much of the surviving original detail. Over the windows of the old Bismarck Hotel, which is now the Hotel Allegro, the Pied Piper leads visitors to Chicago, and St. Christopher keeps them safe. You get a great view of the LaSalle Street Financial District. It's sometimes called the Canyon because the towering Board of Trade encloses it at the southern end. The new Goodman Theater had to be soundproofed because the L runs next to it and the subway runs under it. Many savvy second-floor tenants use their windows to advertise to L riders. The Loop Elevated went into service on October 3, 1897, over 100 years ago. It was built to connect several existing elevated lines owned by different companies. They all stopped just short of downtown. The man who built the so-called Union Loop was Charles Tyson Yerkes. He was a powerful transit baron who controlled street railroads and elevated lines. He built the loop one leg at a time, so property owners wouldn't suspect he was planning to circle the whole downtown. Otherwise, he figured they'd hold out for huge bribes. That was just one of many sly maneuvers that made Yerkes a very unpopular person in his day. The Loop L structure circles the oldest part of the city. From there, L lines extend outward into the neighborhoods in all directions. This movement outward from the center is the way Chicago grew and developed over 150 years. The immigrant poor moved farther and farther out, often following newly constructed L lines and pushing the wealthy further out still. We'll see this again and again on our tour. It's the way neighborhoods change. Today, we've come full circle as wealthy people move back into the loop. Old office buildings are being converted into condos and college dorms. Sears has reopened on State Street after an 18-year absence. Now let's get out of the loop and explore the neighborhoods. We start by heading south on the Green Line. This was the city's very first L line. The owners ran the train through the alleys because it was cheaper than bribing property owners for rights to the streets. Soon, everyone was calling it the Alley L. The steam-powered Chicago and South Side Rapid Transit Railroad Company opened in 1892 between Congress and 39th Street. A year later, the line was extended all the way to Jackson Park for the World's Fair. We passed through the South Loop with its lofts and townhomes. This was once Chicago's Vice District. It was called the Levee. There were brothels, including the famous Everly Club at 16th and Indiana, and there were saloons and gambling houses. The whole sleazy enterprise flourished under the protection of two Chicago aldermen, Bathhouse John Coughlin and Michael Hinky Dink Kenna. At 18th Street is Chicago's oldest building, Clark House. It was built when this was lakefront dune land. It's part of the Prairie Avenue Historic District, which also includes the restored Glessner House. This was one of many mansions that lined Prairie Avenue in the late 1800s when Chicago's wealthiest families lived here. Prairie Avenue aristocrats worshipped at Second Presbyterian Church nearby on Michigan Avenue. Its breathtaking windows by Tiffany and others are among Chicago's hidden treasures. Just a few blocks further south, we pass the home of the oldest black congregation in Chicago, Quinn Chapel. The church was built in 1894, but the congregation goes all the way back to 1847, when Chicago was just 10 years old. At 35th Street, it's the Illinois Institute of Technology, famous throughout the world for its modern architecture. Mies van der Rohe redesigned the entire campus between 1938 and 1958 when he was the head of architecture here. He said, "Less is more," and altered the course of 20th century architecture. The newest building on campus is located right under the L tracks. It's a new student center designed by the acclaimed Dutch architect Rem Koolhaas. The train will run through a tube overhead. The L station at 35th Street has another name, Bronzeville. The name recalls a time when this was one of the most vibrant and influential African American neighborhoods in the whole country. Just steps away from the Bronzeville CTA station is Pilgrim Baptist Church, which is the birthplace of gospel music. Thomas A. Dorsey, who led the choir here, is widely credited with being the first to bring jazz-inspired music into the church. Some worshipers were shocked. As you look around the church, you realize it was once a synagogue. It's a testament to the way neighborhoods change in Chicago. In the late 1800s, this neighborhood was called the Jewish Gold Coast, home to upwardly mobile German Jews. The temple from 1890 was called KAM Synagogue. The famous architects Adler and Sullivan designed it. The Jews also established Michael Reese Hospital nearby. Jewish people shared this neighborhood with upper-class Irish. They built St. James Catholic Church between 1875 and 1880. The Irish also built Mercy Hospital and De La Salle Institute, where 5 Chicago mayors got their education. The wealthiest of the Irish lived in fine homes along a stretch of South Michigan Avenue called Mansion Row. This one belonged to John Bet-A-Million Gates, who made a name for himself as a gambler and made his fortune in barbed wire. According to historian Dominic Basiga, there was a clear line of class distinction in this neighborhood. The rich lived east of State Street, the poor to the west. Federal Street, with its poor Irish and German immigrants, was called the longest slum in the world. Starting around World War I, the Great Migration of blacks from southern states transformed the South Side. Chicago's African American population grew from 44,000 in 1910 to 250,000 in 1930. Because of restrictive housing covenants, the black population was concentrated in a narrow band east and west of State Street that became known as the Black Belt. Like the Irish before them, middle-class African Americans settled east of State Street. This became Bronzeville, the black metropolis. Many of the nation's top black-owned businesses, including banks and insurance companies, clustered around 35th Street. And for shopping and nightlife, 47th Street was the place to be. People dressed to the nines and went out to the Regal Theater and the clubs to hear Duke Ellington, Cab Calloway, Ella Fitzgerald, Nat King Cole, Lena Horne, and many others. Ironically, the beginning of the end for Bronzeville's glory days came with desegregation in the 1950s. African Americans who could afford to move away did. The old Federal Street slum, once the longest in the world, was replaced by the largest public housing projects in the world, Stateway Gardens and Robert Taylor Homes. Many of these troubled high-rises are now being torn down, and residents are uncertain about their future. But privately developed mixed-income high-rises like Lake Meadows and Prairie Shores have been quite successful, and rehabbing is going on in places like the Gap. You can get deeper insight into the story of African Americans on the South Side and everywhere else near the end of the Green Line at Cottage Grove. Just a few blocks north of there in Washington Park is the DuSable Museum of African American History. It was founded by Dr. Margaret Burroughs in 1961. It's the first museum in the country dedicated to preserving the history and the accomplishments of African Americans. We're back in the Loop and ready to head south on another line. You know, in New York, they call their train the subway even when it's elevated. Well, here in Chicago, we call ours the L even when it's underground. The State Street subway was Chicago's first. It opened in 1943. It had the longest continuous subway platform in the world when it was built. This is where we catch the Red Line and head south. Our first stop is Chinatown, near Cermak, Wentworth, and Archer. You see red and green everywhere in this neighborhood. These are the Chinese colors of good luck. About 12,000 ethnic Chinese live here. Many of them are new immigrants. If you're looking for authentic Chinese groceries, you've come to the right neighborhood. If you'd rather have someone else prepare your Chinese meal, you can choose from nearly 60 restaurants. This is actually Chicago's second Chinatown. The first one, which no longer exists, was near Clark and Van Buren in what is today the South Loop. That one started in 1878 with the arrival from the West Coast of a single Chinese man, T.C. Moy. More Chinese soon followed. At the time, Chinese men outnumbered women 100-1 in the U.S. because of harsh immigration laws. The Chinese came to Chicago to escape racial prejudice on the West Coast. But what they couldn't escape were the Tong Wars, rivalries between secret societies. One such society, the An Liang Tong, led its faction here to this neighborhood in 1912. And they built this exuberant building in 1928. Today it's called Pui Tak Center. It provides a variety of social services for new immigrants and for others in the Chinese American community. There's always something to celebrate in Chinatown. The Chinese New Year in February, Lantern Festival in May, the Moon Festival in September, and Double 10 Day celebrating the Republic of China's independence in October. For the rest of its journey to 95th Street, the Red Line runs right down the middle of the Dan Ryan Expressway. The L system serves both of Chicago's Major League Baseball teams. At 35th Street, it's Comiskey Park, built in 1991 for the White Sox. The 43,000-seat ballpark with its 84 luxury skyboxes, as well as its food court, jumbo TV screen, and stratospheric upper deck, replaced the oldest ballpark in America. About the only similarity is the exploding scoreboard, conceived by master showman and Sox owner Bill Veeck in 1960. The Dan Ryan Expressway, built in 1962, parallels the old Black Belt just to the east. It created a physical barrier to racial integration where an unspoken one existed before. Near the end of the Red Line is Chatham, a neighborhood of well-kept bungalows and manicured lawns. Here you'll find the largest middle-class African-American population outside of Harlem and Atlanta. Now it's time to head southwest to Midway Airport on the CTA Orange Line. This is the newest L line, opened in 1993. We're going to start here at the Adams and Wabash station. It was renovated by architect Harry Weiss in 1990. He added those glass panels back there so riders get a view of the Art Institute. Part of the Orange Line was built on existing railroad right-of-way along the Stevenson Expressway. It follows the path of the historic Illinois and Michigan Canal. The canal was built in 1848, and it transformed Chicago from a muddy frontier trading post into a major world city. That's because it connected the Great Lakes to the Mississippi River, and this made Chicago the center of the most important transportation route in the country. The Irish came to dig the canal in the 1830s and 40s. Their shantytown along the river was first called Hard Scrabble, but it became known as Bridgeport because it was near a bridge that was too low for boats to pass beneath. So they had to unload there, and the bridge became a port. From those humble beginnings, Bridgeport grew into Chicago's most politically powerful neighborhood. Mayor Richard J. Daley lived his entire life on Low Avenue here. Bridgeport was home to Chicago's mayors for 46 years, from 1933 to 1979. Today, the neighborhood is majority Mexican American. As in many Chicago neighborhoods, it's the churches that mark ethnic change over time in Bridgeport. The Irish built St. Bridget's in 1850. The Germans built St. Anthony's in 1876. Ethnic change has rarely happened peacefully in Chicago. The Germans and Irish fought in the streets of Bridgeport in 1856. By 1886, the Poles built this church. It's St. Mary of Perpetual Help. They were coming over to take the low-wage jobs as the Irish and Germans prospered. Our next stop on the Orange Line is Ashland. The station straddles a narrow little offshoot of the river's south branch. Now, if you look down there, you can actually see bubbles in the water. That's because this is what's left of the notorious Bubbly Creek. In the 1800s, it was an open sewer, foaming and churning with decomposing waste from the city's most famous industry, the Union Stockyards. The stockyards opened on Christmas Day in 1865. The idea was to centralize meat processing in one location. The concept really took off after Gustavus Swift perfected the refrigerated railroad car in 1870. Men like Swift and Philip Armour controlled meat prices nationwide and made personal fortunes. The packing plants were marvels of efficiency. Tourists flocked there to see how meat packers used everything but the squeal. A branch of the L owned by the stockyards circled the property. In its heyday, the stockyards processed more than 14 million head of livestock a year. Carl Sandburg called Chicago hog butcher for the world, but muckraking author Upton Sinclair had another name for it: the jungle. Sinclair exposed unspeakable working conditions in slaughterhouses and packing plants, and in the surrounding neighborhoods like Back of the Yards and Canaryville. Immigrant workers lived in run-down frame houses on dirt streets with no running water. The smell was oppressive. The neighborhood had its heroes. Mary McDowell, a friend of Jane Addams, pressured the city to fill in Bubbly Creek and close nearby garbage dumps. Unions finally organized the workers after World War I. And in the 1930s, Saul Alinsky and other organizers worked with local churches to lower the crime rate and upgrade housing. This beautiful old gate is all that's left of the stockyards. They closed for good in 1971 after automation made the plants obsolete and interstate trucking decentralized the industry. The old stockyards branch of the L was shut down in 1957 and torn down sometime after that. Today, this whole area has been redeveloped as an industrial park. Continuing on the Orange Line, we pass through Chicago's bungalow belt in Gage Park. 1.5-story bungalow-style homes like these, which you can now find all over the city, were really the embodiment of the American dream. Immigrants sacrificed and saved to make a better life for their families. When they or their children bought a bungalow, they knew they'd made it. By the way, the word bungalow comes from Bengala and refers to a traditional type of housing in India. The Orange Line ends at Midway Airport. The brand new terminal opened here in 2001. Midway was the world's busiest airport from 1932 until 1962, when O'Hare claimed the title. Midway opened as Chicago Municipal Airport in 1927 on the site of an earlier air park with a cinder runway. Air traffic control in those days consisted of a flagman at the end of the runway. The airport was renamed in 1949 to honor the World War II Battle of Midway in the South Pacific. The Board of Education owned this property long before there was an airport here. Until 1955, the Nathan Hale School stood right in between runways 4 left and 4 right. Takeoffs and landings were prohibited on those runways during school hours. The school board finally sold the airport to the city in 1982. You know, for a while, the airlines nearly abandoned Midway, but by 1998, this was the fastest growing airport in North America. In 1999, it served 13 million passengers. You know, as big and busy as the L system is, it was once much bigger and even busier. Before the days when everyone had a car and expressways sliced through the city, L trains and streetcars were the way most people got around. In its heyday, 120 trains an hour entered the loop. In addition to L trains, there were interurban cars destined for Aurora and Milwaukee. This crossing at Lake and Wells downtown was once the busiest rail intersection in the world. And all the switches were thrown manually. The city's separate transit companies were consolidated in 1924 as the Chicago Rapid Transit Company under Utilities Baron Samuel Insull. The CTA took over operations in 1947. The Blue Line begins its westward journey out of the loop near the massive Circle Interchange that connects 3 major expressways. This 1950s-era highway project obliterated large chunks of a near West Side neighborhood that had welcomed immigrants for more than a century. First came the Irish. They built Old St. Patrick's Church at Adams and Des Plaines in 1856. Today, this beautifully restored church is the oldest in the city. In this old West Side Irish shantytown was a small barn that changed the course of Chicago history. It belonged to the O'Learys, and it's where the Chicago Fire was kindled on October 8, 1871. Mrs. O'Leary's barn stood right there where that sculpture is located. This is the Chicago Fire Academy, where our firefighters get their training. You know, the Chicago Fire was a real catalyst for ethnic migration, because afterwards, laws were passed that required brick construction. Groups that couldn't afford to build out of brick or didn't know how had to move outside the city limits. After the Irish moved on, the near West Side became home to Russian and Polish Jews. They were escaping pogroms in their homeland. They worked in garment factories and as peddlers. On Maxwell Street, they created an open-air market just like those in the old country. Greeks settled along Halsted Street west of downtown. What's left of old Greektown today overlooks the highway. Italians settled along Taylor Street west of Halsted in a neighborhood still called Little Italy. All of these immigrants found life full of hardship in their adopted country. One upper-class woman resolved to help them. Jane Addams moved right into the neighborhood in 1907 and established Hull House to provide child care, recreation, and other services. Part of the old Hull House has been preserved on the campus of the University of Illinois at Chicago. But the controversial construction of this school in the 1960s wiped out a large portion of Little Italy and other ethnic enclaves. Architect Walter Netsch designed the cold concrete campus according to idealistic theories about urban planning, but it's been extensively redesigned since. Near Ashland Avenue, the Blue Line splits. One branch continues west and ends in Forest Park near Waldheim Cemetery. In days gone by, L-system funeral cars were used to transport the deceased to this and other city cemeteries. The other Blue Line branch turns south along the old Metropolitan West Side elevated tracks. Medical facilities have been located here since the 1880s. The old Cook County Hospital is the model for County General on the NBC series ER. Also not far from here was the first home of the Chicago Cubs. It was called the West Side Grounds at Polk and Walcott. The West Side Cubbies were world champs in 1907 and 1908. They moved to Wrigley Field in 1914 and haven't won a World Series since. At 18th Street, we find what is probably the city's most colorful L station. It serves Pilsen and neighboring Little Village. These are the most famous Mexican-American communities in the city. You know, according to the 2000 census, Chicago has the second largest ethnic Mexican population in the country.
Go, go, go! Go, 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 go! Oh, he cut.
Many of the murals and mosaics that adorn the neighborhood were actually created by school children with the help of their art teacher, Francisco Mendoza. Mendoza created these mosaics for the new Orozco Public School. His designs were digitized and sent to Mexico for fabrication. Murals by Carlos Cortez and others depict political struggles. This reflects the neighborhood's long tradition of activism for labor and immigrant rights. That tradition actually dates back to the Bohemians who settled the neighborhood after the fire and named it Pilsen after a town in their homeland. They brought an Eastern European style of architecture with them. So did the Poles, who built St. Adelbert's. Today, the Virgin of Guadalupe welcomes the faithful here. The church now offers services in Spanish, Polish, and English. Religious observance takes to the streets of Pilsen every year on Good Friday, when one young man is given the honor of playing Jesus in a monumental reenactment of the crucifixion. The Mexican Fine Arts Center Museum is the pride of the neighborhood. A new addition triples its size. It's the largest Mexican arts institution in the U.S. and the only one accredited by the American Association of Museums. Cinco de Mayo is another day when the whole community comes out to celebrate every year.
El mariachi loco quiere bailar, el mariachi loco quiere bailar. Quiere bailar.
Pilsen's one of those Chicago neighborhoods where you find a lot of first floors below street level. This is because the streets were raised in the late 1800s all over the city to build a contained sewer system. It was only the second in the world after Hamburg, Germany. People in neighborhoods like Pilsen couldn't afford to raise their homes up to the new street level, but many of them did move their entrances up to the second floor. The L was extended west to Cicero in 1907. At one time, 40,000 people worked at the Western Electric plant here. Many of them were Czech immigrants from Pilsen. Today, this water tower stands as a reminder of the plant, which closed in 1986. Now, let's head west from the loop on the Green Line. This is the city's second oldest L line, opened in 1893 as the Lake Street Elevated Railroad. Just west of the loop, old industrial loft buildings are fast becoming condos. Starting at Halsted Street, the city's market district extends west for blocks, bustling with food wholesalers and buyers from restaurants and stores. At 6 in the morning, this is probably the busiest place in Chicago. Just a few blocks away is the United Center, where Michael Jordan and the Bulls electrified audiences throughout the 1990s. This station at Ashland and Lake was restored in 1996 as part of the Green Line renovation. Right down to the decorative cupola. The greenest place on the Green Line is just ahead, Garfield Park. The park dates back to 1869. It was part of the ambitious West Side Park system. The most spectacular feature of the park is the famous conservatory from 1906. It's one of the world's largest. The park straddles two neighborhoods, East and West Garfield Park. They've suffered decades of hardship. Riots after the 1968 murder of Dr. Martin Luther King were devastating. But through it all, the conservatory has remained a lush green oasis. The park and many of its buildings have been beautifully restored, including the lavish administration building. And a new L station now serves Garfield Park. Continuing west, we pass the Austin Town Hall. It's a replica of Independence Hall in Philadelphia. Austin was developed in the 1870s as a comfortable suburb of handsome homes and tree-lined streets. Austin had a nasty rivalry with its next-door neighbor, Oak Park. It was over all sorts of local issues, including getting the L extended out here from Chicago. Oak Park residents were dead set against that one. Got so bad that Oak Park voters spearheaded an effort to get Austin annexed to Chicago. They succeeded in 1889. Many of Austin's original single-family homes are still standing in central Austin. It's now a historic district and the core of a middle-class black community. This branch of the Green Line ends in Oak Park. Frank Lloyd Wright moved here in 1889 at age 22. In those days, Oak Park was still on the edge of the prairie, and that served as Wright's main inspiration. 27 of his designs survive here. The restored Frank Lloyd Wright Home and Studio arranges tours. You can also tour the birthplace of Ernest Hemingway, But don't look for any sentimental odes to Oak Park from him. He summed up his puritanical hometown with the sneering line, "wide lawns and narrow minds." But a lot has changed in Oak Park since then. Today, it's a diverse, middle-class, socially progressive community. The Blue Line runs northwest from downtown as a subway until it emerges near the intersection of Milwaukee North and Damon. The station here at Damon is at the heart of an arty urban neighborhood called Wicker Park. The Flatiron Building and the old Northwest Tower at Milwaukee North and Damon are now full of galleries and studios. There's a huge arts festival here every September called Around the Coyote. The gallery crowd has attracted plenty of clubs, upscale cafes, and restaurants here. Grand old homes surrounding Wicker Park are being restored as the neighborhood continues to gentrify. But Milwaukee Avenue, which slants right through this neighborhood, has always belonged to Chicago's immigrant working class. It was once called Dinner Pail Avenue because so many working class people lived here. First were Germans and Scandinavians, but by the late 1800s, this area was called the Polish Downtown. The Poles built St. Stanislaus Kostka between 1876 and 1881. It's modeled on a church in Krakow. By the turn of the century, it was one of the largest Catholic parishes in the world. It was so important to the community that the Kennedy Expressway was routed around it. The Poles weren't the only Eastern Europeans to settle in this area. Holy Trinity Russian Orthodox Cathedral was built in 1899 with a $4,000 donation from Tsar Nicholas II. Louis Sullivan was the architect. The old Russian and Turkish baths on Division Street are still in operation. Just south of Wicker Park is Ukrainian Village, a tightly knit neighborhood. St. Nicholas Ukrainian Catholic Cathedral at Rice and Oakley was built in 1915. It's a replica of the Cathedral of Kiev. Author Nelson Algren lived in Wicker Park for 3 decades. He vividly described the seedier side of the neighborhood in his books and poems. Today, this area is majority Hispanic as a new wave of immigrants moves up Milwaukee Avenue. The heart of the Puerto Rican community is just west of here in Humboldt Park. Division Street, between California and Western, is marked by gateways representing the Puerto Rican flag. Continuing northwest, the L passes beneath Logan Square, which is named for Civil War General John A. Logan. The column here was built in 1918 to commemorate Illinois' 100th birthday. Stretching east and south from Logan Square are parts of the Grand Old Boulevard system, lined with impressive mansions built in the late 1800s by Germans and Scandinavians. They were later occupied by Jews and Poles. Today, Logan Square is 2/3 Hispanic. The L resurfaces in the middle of the Kennedy Expressway, traveling northwest through Irving Park, Portage Park, Jefferson Park, and Norwood Park, tidy neighborhoods settled by Poles who migrated further up Milwaukee Avenue. The Blue Line was extended all the way to O'Hare in 1984. Chicago's most famous living architect, Helmut Jahn, designed the L station. He also designed the new United Airlines terminal, completed in 1988. His underground passage actually makes the long hike between gates fun. Architect Ralph Johnson designed the spectacular International Terminal, opened in 1993. You ever notice the initials ORD on your O'Hare luggage tags? They stand for Orchard Field, which is what this airport used to be called. It was named for a family orchard and small village that used to stand on the property. During World War II, the government bought the property for an airplane factory. In 1949, the airport was renamed to honor World War II flying ace Edward Butch O'Hare, who was killed in the Pacific in 1942. With the advent of the jet age, O'Hare took over all of Midway's operations in 1962 and instantly became the world's busiest airport. President Kennedy dedicated sparkling new terminals in 1963. O'Hare lost its title as world's busiest in 1999 to Atlanta's Hartsfield International Airport. Planes and trains have one thing in common. They operate under strict safety rules. Speed and spacing between CTA trains are regulated by computerized signals in the operator's cab. If a train gets too close to the train ahead of it, or if it exceeds the speed limit, an alarm sounds, and the operator has just 1.5 seconds to take corrective action. Otherwise, the train stops automatically. But it wasn't always that way. L trains operated without signaling at all until the 1940s. Motormen judged their distance from trains ahead by watching a series of white spacing boards, like fence pickets. You know, over the years, there have been all kinds of proposals to tear down the noisy L structure. But I think most of us agree, Chicago just wouldn't be Chicago without it. The Brown Line heads north from the Loop on elevated tracks. This is the old Northwestern Elevated Railroad, built by Charles Tyson Yerkes and opened in 1900. We cross the double-deck Wells Street Bridge, past the Merchandise Mart, and wind our way into River North, Chicago's Gallery District. This red-hot neighborhood was the site of Chicago's earliest industrial zone. Lumber mills, brickyards, and tanneries crowded the river's edge, surrounded by a squalid shanty town. By 1900, it was called Little Hell. The Cabrini Green housing projects replaced Little Hell starting in the 1940s. Mother Cabrini was the first American saint. But upscale development today is crowding out Cabrini Green, and some Cabrini residents have expressed skepticism about city promises of mixed-income housing here. Sedgwick is the stop for Old Town. It's an affluent neighborhood of lovingly restored cottages. Germans settled here in the mid-1800s to farm and to work in nearby factories. By 1900, North Avenue was called German Broadway. It's said that if you can hear the bells of St. Michael's, you know you're in Old Town. Germans built the church in 1869. The walls actually survived the Great Fire. Old Town is the home of the Second City, which helped give birth to Chicago's acclaimed improv comedy scene. Second City produced a who's who of American comedy: Alan Arkin, John Belushi, Bill Murray, Dan Aykroyd, Gilda Radner, Mike Myers, and many others. The Old Town Art Fair started back in 1950 when this neighborhood was kind of a starving artists colony. Then in the 60s, it became sort of a counterculture tourist trap and hippie enclave. You might remember Wells Street as a strip of peep shows, head shops, and political bookstores. The Old Town Art Fair still takes place every June, but it now reflects the more upscale quality of the neighborhood. Continuing on the Brown Line, we pass the Tony Award-winning Steppenwolf Theater, which is nationally acclaimed for its rough-and-tumble acting style. Ensemble members include John Malkovich, John Mahoney, Gary Sinise, and Laurie Metcalf. The theater, built in 1991, is specially engineered to prevent L noise and vibration from reaching the audience. At Armitage, we enter Lincoln Park. This many-turreted commercial strip is an upscale mecca of boutiques, trendy bars, and restaurants. Homes in this neighborhood routinely sell for over $1 million today. Fullerton Avenue in Lincoln Park is where the Chicago fire finally burned itself out. The 36-acre campus of DePaul University surrounds this L-stop. It's the nation's largest Catholic university. DePaul's legendary basketball coach, Ray Meyer, led his team to 21 postseason appearances in 42 years. Lincoln Park is also known for its gangster history. The FBI gunned down John Dillinger at the Biograph Theater on Lincoln Avenue in 1934. And the St. Valentine's Day Massacre took place in a garage on Clark Street. The garage is long gone, but the site, which is on the grounds of a senior citizen building, is said to be haunted. As we continue north on the Brown Line, we follow the path of German migration up Lincoln Avenue. First, they settled in the town of Lakeview, which was annexed to Chicago in 1889 over the opposition of its mayor, Billy Boldenweck. He refused to turn over his city's treasury to Chicago until the state Supreme Court forced him to. Lakeview today is mostly a neighborhood of urban professionals. But you can still have a German pastry at Dinkle's on Lincoln Avenue and work out in a former German athletic club on Diversey. The Germans were fanatical about fitness and established Turner clubs all over the north side. But of course, they didn't offer spinning, Pilates, and a climbing wall. If you're looking for a place where the old world survives, take the Brown Line here, a few stops north to Western Avenue. Lincoln Square celebrates Mayfest every spring and German American Fest every September. But it seems like every day is German in this neighborhood.
Thank you very much. Dankeschön.
You'll find an authentic German maypole and a mural that depicts images from across Germany, including Cologne Cathedral and King Ludwig's Castle in Bavaria. You can hoist a good German beer at the Chicago Brauhaus and shop in authentic German delis. Mertz Apothecary dates from 1875 and sells natural, herbal, and homeopathic remedies, as well as German toiletries. This flamboyant facade was architect Louis Sullivan's last hurrah. Earlier in his career, he designed great buildings like the Auditorium and Carson Pirie Scott downtown. But by the time one of his former employees hired him for this job, he was alone and nearly penniless. Today, it's a store called the Museum of Decorative Art. Just across the street is the new home of the Old Town School of Folk Music, which moved to Lincoln Square in 1998. The L descends to grade level, just west of Lincoln Square, as it enters Ravenswood Manor and Ravenswood Gardens. These neighborhoods are still remarkable for their suburban feeling and fine brick homes. Some of those homes are right along the river. Would you believe this is Chicago? Many of the early settlers in this area were celery farmers. At one time, the Ravenswood area was part of the largest celery growing area in the United States. The last neighborhood on the Brown Line is Albany Park. Almost half the population here is foreign-born. This stretch of Kedzie says it all. You can get everything from pita bread to pad thai. Russian Jews were the majority until the 1950s. Koreans played a large role in revitalizing the neighborhood after it hit bottom in the 1970s. A stretch of Lawrence Avenue is called Honorary Soul Drive. Now, let's go back to Belmont and pick up the Red Line. This is the old North Main Line to Evanston and beyond. East of the Belmont L station is Chicago's largest gay community, centered along Halsted Street. Gay Pride Parade in June mixes political activism with outrageous exhibitionism. At Addison, we're in a part of Lakeview that everyone knows as Wrigleyville. Wrigley Field was called Weigman Park when it was built in 1914 for the Chicago Whales of the Federal League. Win or lose, game days, and every other day, this neighborhood is alive with bars, restaurants, comedy clubs, and souvenir shops. North of Wrigleyville, the L passes Graceland Cemetery, which is the final resting place of many famous Chicagoans. Unlike earlier Chicago cemeteries, it sits on high ground. Clark Street, which borders Graceland, was an ancient lakeshore. Later it was an Indian trail called Green Bay Road. Among the graves and tombs, you'll find the city's greatest architects, including Daniel Burnham, Louis Sullivan, and Mies van der Rohe, whose gravestone reflects his motto, "Less is more." You'll also find the great State Street developer Potter Palmer of Palmer House fame, and his wife Bertha, whose lavish Gold Coast parties made her the queen of Chicago society. Beneath this stately monument, George Pullman's casket is protected with asphalt, railroad ties, and tons of concrete to prevent angry workers from tampering with the famous strikebreaker's body. There are some great works of art among the monuments. This is Eternal Silence by Laredo Taft. The creators of the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C. designed Marshall Field's tomb. The Getty Tomb is one of two that Louis Sullivan designed before he himself became a permanent resident of Graceland. It's considered one of the masterpieces of his career. At Wilson Avenue, we arrive in Uptown. The faded glory of this old station is a testament to the days when this was one of Chicago's hottest neighborhoods. Young people danced the night away at the Aragon and other ballrooms, and they took in picture shows at the Riviera and at the vast Uptown Theater with its 4,381 seats. The interior was capped by a 120-foot dome. The Uptown had 3 lobbies and 6 marquees. Uptown revelers rubbed elbows with movie stars like Charlie Chaplin and Gloria Swanson, who lived in Chicago. They worked at S&A Studios on Argyle Street. The Green Mill, which opened in 1907, is still swinging. It was a gangster hangout during Prohibition. The Riviera and the Aragon are now popular concert venues. But the neighborhood started declining in the 1960s as shopping and entertainment migrated to the suburbs. The Uptown Theater closed in 1981. Goldblatt's shut down in 1998. Uptown became sort of a point of entry for many groups: Appalachians and Africans, Native Americans, Latinos, and especially Southeast Asians who brought new life to an area a little bit north of here around the Argyle L stop.
Rice noodle. It's a fresh rice noodle.
Heading north, we pass the former upper-class suburb of Edgewater. The developer promoted this community as the only electric-lighted suburb adjacent to Chicago and promised paved streets and sewers. Big band radio broadcasts from the swanky Edgewater Beach Hotel were heard all over the country. But when Lakeshore Drive was extended north, Edgewater was cut off from the lake. The hotel was torn down, and a wall of undistinguished high-rises replaced former lakefront mansions. The last neighborhood on the Red Line is Rogers Park. It's the home of Loyola University Chicago, which was established by the Jesuits in 1909. This chapel, which faces Lake Michigan on the Loyola campus, is called Madonna della Strada, which very roughly translates into Our Lady of the Highway. When the chapel was built, there were plans to extend Lakeshore Drive all the way to the northern border of Chicago. That was never done, so Our Lady of the Highway looks out to sea instead. At one time, Russian Jews were the largest ethnic group in Rogers Park. But by 1975, more than 70 languages were spoken in local grammar schools. This is the Howard Street Terminal. From here you can travel north on two former branches of the old North Shore Line. The Skokie Swift takes you to a suburb known for its large Jewish population. The CTA's Purple Line runs through Evanston, named for John Evans, one of the strict Methodists who founded Northwestern University in 1851. The founders prohibited the sale of alcohol within a 4-mile radius of campus. Evanston later became the home of the Women's Christian Temperance Union. Today, Evanston is a large and diverse suburb, and Northwestern is one of the nation's top schools, especially known for its theater department, the Medill School of Journalism, and the Kellogg Business School. The Purple Line ends in the affluent North Shore suburb of Wilmette. Red line, green line, yellow, purple, blue, brown, all those color codes gave longtime CTA riders a bit of trouble when they were first introduced a few years ago. But now that you've toured the system with us, maybe you see the colors in a different light, as a reflection of the city itself. After all, the people who live along the L are every color of the rainbow, and that rich diversity is one of the things that makes Chicago a truly great American city.
Chicago by L, Touring the Neighborhoods, is made possible through a generous contribution from LaSalle Bank, the bank that works.